This is the brand new Nike GT Run, and whether you play basketball, tennis, volleyball, pickleball, paddle, whatever, the engineering of this shoe represents an absolute paradigm shift in the way we construct court shoes. Let me explain. Hey, what is up? Zach here, and typically on this channel we are dissecting court shoes of just about every make and model for every sport you play on a court. And so that's when I found the Nike GT Run came out. I just had to get my hands on a pair because this shoe just really brings together a ton of new technology that is still finding its way in the court shoe space. So I really wanted to see, did all this tech that Nike stuffed in here really do something to elevate the sneaker game, or is it just kind of tech for tech's sake? So let's get into them. Now the fit of the GT Runs is pretty interesting because the uppers are all mesh. They do break in for a lot of foot types over time. However, when you initially get into them, they actually are pretty hard to get your foot sunk into because the undercarriage of that mesh is so grabby. It's actually hard, so if you have textured socks, it's actually pretty hard to get your foot in there at first until it breaks in. Now once they break in, the shoe does expand pretty well because it is just all mesh. Now if you look at the last of the shoe, it is noticeably inflared. So if you are somebody with a wide neutral or wide flat foot, that means your foot, if you're a right footer, goes right and your left footer goes left, no amount of going up in size is gonna make you fit this shoe just because the last is so inflared. So a neutral medium foot or a true width foot or even a little bit of a wide inflared foot will fit this shoe fine. However, if you are wide and flat or wide and neutral, I just think you gotta look somewhere else. I'd say if you're a high arch foot or a neutral foot, this shoe is absolutely fantastic. It's gonna give you a ton of cushion, especially for a high arch foot. You're gonna find a lot of padding under the heel and ball. If you are someone that has a more flat foot, I probably would put an orthotic in this, even if it's just an over-the-counter power step or super feet or something like that, just to give you a little bit more support under the arch because of all that React foam there. It can just be a little bit too forgiving with really aggressive movement, but an orthotic in there really does make up for that. Now what's really interesting about the uppers, which I kind of touched on during the fit, is that this mesh caging, when you first get into it, is actually really annoying. It bends and creases in different spots, just a little bit stiff. It does breathe exceptionally well, however, especially for a mid-top basketball shoe, especially if you're in hot, humid conditions. But because of all that mesh caging and how thin it is, especially in the tongue, I know it has these little foam pods that jut out to stop the laces from jabbing into the top part of your foot. However, between where these foam pods are on the top part of your foot and where the ankle pad is right up at the top, right where the tongue is, there is an area where there is no padding. And when you first cinch the laces down, it is really annoying. You really feel the laces on your foot, especially if you're somebody who's medium to high arched foot. So if you are going to buy these, I would get some moleskin or just felted foam and put it underneath of there, or wear a really thick pair of socks like Thorlo. I'll link some in the description below, that way you can see it and get it for yourself if you really want to buy these. The entire upper is basically just mesh except for where the heel counter is, which is actually pretty stiff. There is some padding right here at the front part of your ankle. It's actually pretty minimalist except right where the Achilles goes, where there is a little Achilles pad. But on the upper durability test, the Dremel 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, the Dremel really only got through that top waxy layer. It didn't get through the mesh at all. So these are actually surprisingly durable for how light and airy they are. On the Midsole Teardown, the first thing that struck me was how relatively tough the mesh was to get through, which makes sense considering how much more supportive it is on court than it actually looks in your hands. The removable insole was glued down pretty good, and it's a bit more dense than a standard, which is a nice touch. Now getting through the midsole, you see this is an entire bed of React foam, and because it's a double stack zoom air unit, the heel to toe drop is pretty shallow. And this is a smart design in the double stack, as the top unit is more broad and the bottom unit is centered on the ball of the foot for really max cushion right where you would be pivoting or jumping, making these great for people with any sort of ball of foot or metatarsal pain. And because these shoes are made of a lot lighter materials, they only come in at 14.14 ounces for a size 11 men's. And in terms of performance on the serve jump height test, an average of 31 centimeters, which isn't as high as I thought they would be, and that comes down to the React foam being so soft with no rigid shank, which is why I said in the fit section these aren't great for overpronators. So you have the air tension in the zoom air units, but nothing to act as a cantilever to give those two zoom air units something rigid to release energy into. But still, for a lighter and softer shoe, it's a pretty good height. Now the outsole treads the GT runs that regenerative pattern, which means it's the same repeating pattern from the heel to the forefoot in just different widths and directions. Now the one great thing about this style of pattern is it gives you a ton of suction cup onto a court, especially a hardwood court. On an outdoor court, you are going to get pretty good traction for a little while. However, because the tread depth is low and because the tread is so thin, as you see here, there's not a lot of thickness here to the outcroppings of the tread. It is just gonna wear down a little bit quicker than something that's made for an outdoor court. However, while it's new, it's gonna grip great. And on the outsole durability test, the Dremel 10 seconds high grit sandpaper, you can really see what I'm talking about that durability for outdoor courts. The tread depth on these is only about 3 millimeters, and the Dremel bit through it just about to 3 millimeters. So if you are going to use these on outdoor courts, remember they are going to wear through pretty quick. However, on an indoor hardwood court, they're gonna last quite a bit longer. And on the suicide test, you can see I'm actually jumping into my first few turns because of the pop of the Zoom Air double stack, as well as the suction cupping of the treads gives you a lot of confidence. However, in terms of speed, they're just average on speed because no rigid shank, so you don't get that sustained push off on these shoes. And a perfect example right here, as you can see all that pronation there on the mid part of the shoe. And here, just a warning, if the court surface is wet because the tread depth is so low, you can actually get hydroplaning, so if you are going to play with these outside, make sure the court's dry. Now, playability-wise in the GT runs, they do stand apart a lot from some other shoes in their space because the uppers are so mesh cagey and light versus the midsole and outsole, which is so maximalist for a basketball shoe. They kind of occupy two different spaces. Now the uppers are a lot more secure than they look. I was really expecting the uppers to not really hold my foot in very well, especially because I am in-flared and as well as I'm a little bit heavier, so I thought when I was making cuts and turns that these were going to give a little bit. They really didn't. The upper is actually super strong for how light they are. Now, the midsole and the outsole, if you want a shoe where you're really getting a lot of ground contact and ground feel, a lot of tactile feel, this definitely isn't your shoe. You can definitely feel the air tension underneath of your foot. So you do feel a lot of buoyancy under there, almost like you're on a hovercraft. However, if you're someone that just wants a lot of bounce and a lot of springboard, just a lot of feedback from your movement, or someone that maybe just needs a little bit of that extra hop or bounce, someone like me definitely, this shoe really will fit the bill. It's just if you're somebody that likes to really feel the ground and kind of prowl with your movement, these probably aren't the best shoe. It is a good shoe, however, if you're just looking for one explosive movement, or if you're looking to try to, no pun intended, outrun somebody or try to outrun someone to the ball, that one explosive first step, then this shoe is definitely a pickup for you. But I think overall, on an indoor court especially, and at least on a wet outdoor court, these shoes are going to fit the bill for basketball, tennis, pickleball, paddle, volleyball, badminton, pretty much any court sport you want to play. If you're someone that's looking for a little bit more height off your jump, a little bit more explosive first movement, a little more pop off of that first step, or if you're just someone that's looking for a little bit more accommodation and forgiveness. But of course, I'd love to know your feedback. Are you interested in a shoe with this minimal of an upper, even though they are pretty supportive, just from a comfort standpoint and a break-in standpoint, as well as are you someone that is willing to give a double stack Zoom Air unit plus React foam unit a try, given all kind of the dichotomy of it, the super bounce of this shoe, but with sort of the below average arch support? Let me know in the comments down below. And I really think this year has actually been pretty decent in terms of new sneaker releases, especially these companies trying to level up the basketball sneaker as well as just court shoe game in general with some of the new tech they're stuffing in shoes. Now yeah, some have been hits, some have been misses, but if you want to experience some of that new tech, make sure you click into the video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you in that video.